Final Fantasy XI had a sense of magic to it that very few games have instilled in me since, and that was in no small part due to its incredible zone design. Every corner of Vana'diel was memorable, but for one reason or another, certain zones stick out in my mind more than others. In an effort to narrow that list down in today's video, I'll be going through my favorite zones for my favorite expansion, Chains of Promathia. So hey guys, it's Hunt4Games, bringing you a healthy mix of videos on new releases and MMOs, and nostalgia trips for the classics that made us fall in love with games in the first place. And no nostalgia trip is as good as the good old days of crushing difficulty, and nothing said crushing difficulty like the release of Chains of Promathia. Eviscerated low-level alliances, exploding snowls, and ruthless airship battles. Chains of Promathia pushed the player base to the limit of frustration. But for all those difficult battles and trials, there was the reward of some of the most immersive zones Final Fantasy XI had seen to date, and some of my favorites in the game to this day. Let's get right into the list, starting with the original gate to entry, the Promethean zones. Now, this is obviously cheating a bit because it's really 3 different zones, each corresponding to a crag of Hala, Dem, or Maya, but these zones were a truly terrifying experience for the low-level 30s that had access. While Zillard had the quest for Gazam keys, Promathia forced you through a gauntlet of level 30 capped floating and skittering nightmares to even get to a battle that took multiple attempts to even succeed. It then asked you to do it 2 more times for the other zones. These empty, shattered realms seemed to hold so many secrets, structures, trees, landscapes that almost seemed like somewhat familiar, or they would if they weren't so fragmented and floating in an unending abyss of blackness. It was bleak, terrifying visage, and honestly didn't really fit with my mind's version of Vana'diel. Sure, there may be wars in this world, terrible magic that threatened the way of life and of its inhabitants, but nothing like this oozing blackness that had just consumed these regions we now resided in. Unlike other zones, they truly seemed to just go on forever, with carefully laid platforms that were in fact unreachable, always seeming like they were just an unfound teleport away. I always felt like there was more to see, but would never be able to explore the truth of that myself. Because between the just general danger and unsettling sounds, these zones weren't that inviting, and until the level caps were released in recent years, no matter how strong you got, Promi would continue to hold the same threats, unchanging and unwavering in its difficulty. Something about that seemed perfect for that zone, and I'll admit I was a little sad to hear that its caps were lifted, as helpful as that may be. They seem somehow smaller now than they did back at level 30 in 2006, and that unshakable worry is something that's forever been lost. They're beautiful, terrible, memorable zones, and for an MMO, they were truly special. Of course, once those gauntlets were bested, they led on to 2 zones that were in every way their opposite, Miseru Coast and Lufay's Meadows. I debate about giving each one of these its own section because they honestly deserve it, but in all honesty, I mix them up constantly. They're practically the same zone in truth, blanketing Tavnazia from the rest of the world, and they were your first view of Chains of Promathia outside of the Promi zone. Compared to the dark, unending coldness of Promethean, these 2 landscapes were full of life and vitality. Rolling hills, lush green fields, distant forests, and winding rivers. From shimmering coasts to cliffs lined with cascading falls, it was in my mind the perfect zone. And then nature would hit with a ferocity I'd rarely seen in Vana'diel, with dark thunderclaps during double lightning weather, transitioning the serene landscape to something more dangerous and threatening. These are some of the few zones I look back on, not with memories of notorious monster camping, of which I only did some, but just general wandering experience. I'd farm feathers for a while, or go see the waterfall, or visit my favorite spot in Vana'diel overlooking the ruins of the original Tavnazia, and just sort of be there. These weren't zones I wanted to go through or to best. I just wanted to hang out. The music is some of the best in the game, and the enemies were an exciting collection of monster types. Giant birds, Fomor, Treants, rams, clusters. Each enemy was threatening because they were powerful and difficult to best, and they complemented the zones perfectly. And I should really spend more time talking about Fomor because man, they were super creepy. First time I saw them I was convinced one was a notorious monster, which it turns out is not the case. They're just creepy looking. I mean, these zones and enemies just captured my imagination like no other, and I'll always remember them fondly. Of course, if I like Fomor, I'd be remiss to only mention Miseru Coast and Lufay's, where they appear only at night in select locations. The true Fomor hotspot is also the 3rd on this list, Ammonia Aqueducts. As there is on every list, I expect this to be the why the hell would you pick that item on this collection of favorite zones, but it just holds such special memories for me. This was one of the instance cap zones found in Vana'diel, locking you in at level 40 until the recent change that did away with most of the game's caps. While frustrating to many, this had the effect of essentially creating an area in which someone who had just reached level 40 or someone who had been 75 for years were essentially equally valuable. I always thought that was a magical thing and gave me a fresh perspective on the game whenever I'd farm in the area. But honestly, outside of a few start-related missions and quests, there really wasn't much going on here. So why am I so fond of it? Two reasons: Fomor codexes and Supplicar runs. Epic and Hayden in their guild-driven fury once discovered that the Taurus near the entrance were fairly easy to take down as a blue or beast solo, as long as you could quickly turn away to avoid the literal doom coming out of their eyeballs. They'd mortal ray constantly, but you could spin to avoid it if you were on your toes. The Fomor Codex was used to pop the Swift Belt in M, one of the better leveling waste pieces in the game for melee, so people would buy up the pop item for a decent amount. It was dangerous, fun farming without much competition. The Supplicar were a little tougher, and they would drop from each job's respected Fomor. They could be converted via quest into some amazing level 50 body pieces for each job, some of which were truly valuable. As a Beastmaster, you could solo some using slimes and 2 hours, but Supplicar parties were common because of how great they could be. It was just an active and unique zone, dangerous and low level, but with some truly great rewards. I spent so much time there, I couldn't not include it. I want to hear your thoughts in the comments below though. Do experiences matter more for an impression of a zone, or the design of the zone itself? Or some kind of combo? And if you love revisiting gorgeous games like Final Fantasy XI, consider subscribing. As far as zones go that I didn't spend a lot of time in though, this one is definitely high up on the list. The beautiful and distant Purgatory Island. Really? Purgatory? I've never once said that correctly. This beautiful island was home of the game's first Black Mandragora. Beautiful beaches and hidden coves, white sands, but few monsters of note. Besides the pugil that drops those dragoon boots and the Pops reference male guy, I can't really think of a single one. But that was okay, because it was a relaxing, beautiful location far from the bustling cities and Dynamis runs. I mean, hell, you even had to take a boat to get out here, a boat that didn't come around too often. It was out there, meaning I was rarely, if ever, actually there, but I was always convinced that I was missing something, some greater purpose to the zone that I didn't know about, some hidden monsters that hadn't yet been found. But it was truly just a unique corner of Vana'diel, hidden, sequestered beauty that went nowhere and provided very little in terms of what most players would consider game benefit. And I think that's great. It's important every once in a while to just sit down and smell the roses, but I do wish they'd expanded more on it later. I guess if you liked clamming, it was pretty cool. Bringing us to the last, but certainly not least, zone on this list. I doubt this comes as a surprise to any fan of Promathia, as it was honestly one of the most beautiful and memorable zones found in gaming. A fitting reward to besting the truly difficult Promathia missions one after another, you'd eventually find yourself in the majestic Altair, more commonly known as C. Every player remembers their first steps in Altair, and I bet their jaws are on the floor for every moment. It was the most incredible thing I'd ever seen in Final Fantasy XI, and to be honest, they never really topped it. The vibrant blues and purples were so explosive compared to much of Vana'diel, which could often be more muted. It was just like you were moving around in this bright, beautiful painting. Walking around on what looked like the surface of a lake, you could see down through to the bottom, each step kind of flashing little ripples on the unknown liquid, and the enemies, oh my god, the enemies. As bright as the zones themselves and totally unique to this area. Some would float around in groups of 3, some would follow you but never initiate battle unless attacked. Sharks would slide through the water beneath you and then leap up gracefully to attack you if you came within range, and I doubt anyone forgets the terror of the first time they encountered a UFO. The zone and its inhabitants were unique, fascinating, and utterly beautiful. I revisited countless times to just experience the incredible art that came together to form Altair, and it easily makes the list of one of my top favorite areas in this game. Also, I think in this video I've now said the name of this zone more times than I have in my entire life. I've always called it C, and to be honest, I'm not even sure I'm pronouncing it correctly. Also, why did we start calling it C? I'm pretty sure it's like on the moon or something. It's out in space, right? We'll have to wait till the Moghouse gets here with his lore videos, because I honestly forget. But guys, that's it for our top 5 zones of Chains of Promathia, one of the most fun videos I've ever made. Some runners-up would easily be Tavnazia itself, River and Sight B1, or Bibiki Bay, but each had a fault that kind of kept me from putting it on this list. I want to hear your thoughts as well though, and areas from the expansion that you think deserve a spot. Question of the week: what is the worst story that you have during the initial level 30 Promethean missions? I remember all 18 of us in an alliance going down the exact wrong way and dying pretty horrifically with no hope of resurrection, having to start right back from the beginning. Can't wait to hear yours, and thanks everybody for tuning in. See you guys in the next one. Peace. Thanks for watching. If you're interested in more videos like this, think about subscribing. And if you already have, don't forget to click that little bell next to the sub button to get notified when new videos go live. Hit me up in the comments with your thoughts on this video, or come hang out and chat with me on Twitch every Tuesday night at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And definitely look me up on Twitter or Instagram and Hunt for Games to keep up with what else I've got going on. See ya.